Think Central Lesson 8.4 will be all about learning about attributes or characteristics of quadrilaterals. Let's take a second to understand what it means to classify a quadrilateral. Classifying means you kind of put them in categories, how they belong in some sort of order. So the first thing you have to understand is all of these are quadrilaterals because they all have four straight sides. So everything under this is kind of an umbrella, and they're all quadrilaterals. So, but not all quadrilaterals are parallelograms. By definition, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both opposite sides are parallel to each other. Trapezoids don't have two opposite sides that are parallel. So those are not parallelograms, but they are quadrilaterals. A subcategory of a parallelogram is a rectangle because rectangles have opposite sides parallel, but they're special in that they also have four right angles. Rhombuses have opposite sides parallel, but they don't necessarily have to have four right angles. And then finally, at the bottom of the character are squares. Squares are both rectangles and they are rhombuses. They are also parallelograms and they are also quadrilaterals, but squares are not trapezoids. So let's take a quick look at definitions of these things. So study this on this page. Squares, opposite side, all sides the same, four right angles. Rhombuses, all sides the same, they're congruent. You can see the little congruency marks here. That means the sides are the same size and shape. They're called congruent, but doesn't have to be four right angles. So you notice that a square is a rhombus, but these are also rhombuses and they're not squares. A quadrilateral is just any four-sided shape. Doesn't really matter as long as they have four straight sides. Rectangles are opposite sides parallel, four right angles, opposite sides parallel and congruent four right angles. So you can see squares are rectangle, but these are just regular rectangles. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel sides. So these are parallel, but these sides are not. These are parallel, these sides are not. These are parallel, these sides here are not. So those are trapezoids. And a parallelogram is both opposite sides are parallel with each other. You notice I put a hash mark there and 2. If you see these, that means these sides are congruent. If you see these on both sides, that means those sides are congruent. I think it's important to spend a little bit of time studying these so you can get used to them. So in the first question, they're asking you to find a counterexample or a reason to prove the answer is true or false. If the answer is true, you can't find a counterexample because all examples are true. If the answer is false, you can find one piece of evidence why that statement is not true. So in this question, all quadrilaterals, it's important to identify that they're telling about all quadrilaterals have at least one pair of parallel sides. Now, right off the bat, I can see that statement is false because a quadrilateral is a four-sided shape. This is a four-sided shape here, but it doesn't have one pair of parallel sides. All sides are not parallel. So that is a quadrilateral, and that proves this statement to be false. Again, we're looking for a counterexample if it's false, or all of them will be true if it's true. So the question is, a rhombus has to have at least one acute angle. Remember, rhombuses are shapes that have all four sides congruent or the same, and it has to have at least one congruent angle. So this is a rhombus. It has a congruent angle, so that would make the statement true. So that doesn't apply. It's not a counterexample. This is also a rhombus. It has four congruent sides, but it doesn't have an acute angle. Squares have four right angles, and right angles are neither acute nor obtuse. So this is an example. B is an example of a shape that is a rhombus, but it doesn't have any acute angles. Therefore, it proves a counterexample, and B would prove that as a counterexample. So the statement is false. All squares have opposite sides. All squares have opposite sides that are parallel. Well, that is a true statement because if you look at any square, the sides, I will try to draw a square here, opposite sides are always parallel. You can't have a square without opposite sides being parallel because the angles all have to meet at a 90-degree angle. So there's no way to construct a quadrilateral with that is a square with 4 right angles where opposite sides are not parallel. So the statement is true. So we're looking for a shape that will fit this description. A parallelogram with exactly 2 right angles. There's a parallel. That's not a parallelogram, because parallelogram is opposite sides have to be parallel, and these sides over here and here are not parallel. So that's not a parallelogram. This is a parallelogram, but it does not have exactly 2 right angles. So that's that out. This is not a parallelogram because this side and this side are not parallel, nor are this side and this side. So this is not a parallelogram. As a matter of fact, it's not possible to make a parallelogram that has 2 right angles, because if I have a right angle here, then that means this line goes down straight, and if I have a right angle here, that means this line is straight. So if they're straight, they also form right angles on the edge, on the corners or edges, vertices. So it is not possible to construct a parallelogram with only 2 right angles. All parallelograms will have none or 4 right angles. Okay, so we're looking for a rectangle with adjacent sides the same length. When they say adjacent sides, they mean the sides that are right next to each other, like a corner. They meet at a corner. Those sides are adjacent. Opposite sides are the ones across from each other. Adjacent sides are the ones next to each other that form a corner. So this is not a rectangle. This is a rectangle, and the adjacent sides are not the same length. This is a square, but it's also a rectangle, because rectangles are defined as opposite sides parallel and 4 right angles. So a square is a special kind of rectangle. So this would be a rectangle with adjacent sides the same length. So the answer should be C. And that's it for lesson 814, attributes of quadrilaterals. Probably need to spend a little bit of time doing a few example problems, going over them, really speaking to yourself, using self-talk to go through attributes, to practice the language of the discipline, because that's how you're going to really master these things. It's not something you can just jump at and get an answer. You have to think through reasons why not. So use test-taking strategy of eliminate wrong answer first, and you'll be fine. Make sure to ask us if you have any questions.